Hello, what's going on, YouTube fam? This is your boy J Money here, and I'm bringing you guys part 2 of my segment of thing. Now, we're going to part 2, which is search reliance. Now, for this one, I'm going to reference a deck that I already own, and that's Necros, because that's what I own. Now, there are a lot of search reliant decks out there. Spirals is a very, very search reliant deck, and you would think Goki's falls into that category. However, the thing about Goki's is that because they have a card like Goki Rematch, and they abuse Summon Sorceress to the maximum, combined with the 2 monsters that they will summon off Rematch, plus Firewall, plus the rest of the cards in their hand, they can still perform what they need to perform. But Spirals, however, they need to have the quick fix searches, they need to have the master plan searches. That's something they have to have in order to complete any sort of viable combo. But anyway, but there's also things like Blue Eyes, to where they have a lot of draw cards and a lot of search cards to mitigate those bricks. And cards like Ash Blossom, Jewel, and Lockbird and all that stuff is really, really problematic to decks like that. But this is a good reference as well because it's a ritual deck. Any deck that has any sort of ritual cards needs to have a bunch of search cards in it anyway, because you need to consistently access your ritual monster and your ritual spells. So with that being said, any deck that let's see. You know what? We're gonna go ahead and get started, and I'm gonna show you, some things. Search a monster, search a spell or trap, search any ritual spell or ritual monster, search a ritual monster and add a ritual spell, search a monster, search a ritual spell, add ritual spells. Now these right here are the less generic searchers, but some decks require a little bit less generic searchers just to, to piece things all together. You may not always have these generic searchers, so things like these can fill the void very easily. Now there are other cards that are indirect searchers, like let's say Zaborg sending something like Herald, which in turns gets you the search, but it's doing it indirectly. Now, decks that are search reliant are vulnerable to anti-search cards. However, it's a testament to, it's generally understood, the more search cards you have in your deck, the more consistent your deck is, and consistency is always a good thing. Now, I have said before, Joel Lockbird is, it punishes decks for being consistent, and all that good stuff. So we're going to do what we did yesterday and start off with how to mitigate these things, i.e. hand traps, because they are the most prominent thing right now. By the Graves, and Saffron Gear Gammas this time, because any deck that's search reliant is going to want to get all their pieces searched out before they even put monsters onto the board. Again, Joel Lockbird is your biggest threat. Although search reliant decks are more weak to back row decks, Droll is still the more dangerous card because it requires no setup to be played on turn 0, and the moment a card requires no setup, it can be played in some of the fastest decks you can think of, so the fear of getting OTK'd is very, very high if you cannot search. So Joel Lockbird is still your biggest threat, even though search reliant decks struggle against back row heavy decks more. The fact that Joel Lockbird can be played in the fastest decks makes it to where you're likely going to get OTK'd if it goes through. So, unfortunately, these are really the only 2 options for Joel. Well, there is, as I stated in the last video, Instant Fusions and Millenniumizer Strict. Those are your 3 options as to dealing with things like Joel and Lockbird or Ash Blossom. Because some search reliant decks rely on their ability to search one specific card. So, if your opponent gets wind of what you're trying to search, that's crucial to your combo, and they drop an Ash Blossom, that can be problematic as well. But the more search cards you have, like so, Ash Blossom isn't really too much of a problem, because if practically your whole deck is searchers, then you're going to get to what you need to get to anyway. But on to the meat and the potatoes. Back row. Back row heavy decks are Search Reliance deck's biggest weakness, because any and all back row decks will play anti-search cards. Mistake is a really big one, so we're going to start with that. We're going to start with mistakes. So obviously, back row decks have one thing in common: they play a ton of back row. So a lot of these cards are going to be very, very similar in a sense. So we're going to go Twin Twisters for mass back row removal. Now, sometimes you can outgrind back row very, very easily, and you only just need to deal with that one mistake, and you'll be fine. So maybe you want singular back row removal, like Mystical Space Typhoon, Twin Twisters, or no, Cosmic Cyclone, and all that good stuff. You know, if your deck is very, very easily able to outgrind and all that good stuff, then maybe you just want to singularly remove that one card. But sometimes the deck you're playing is a little slower and you can't reliably just push through back row, so you might want to, you know, permanently shut down back row. Cards like Royal Decree are still a great option. Now, if your deck is really, really fast and you can reliably OTK through back row, then I always recommend Red Reboot. Red Reboot is such an amazing card for pushing through back row and going for OTK. It's not even funny. All back row decks have to fear not only evenly matched, but this card as well, because of the fact that this is a counter trap. So only counter traps can deal with counter traps, and back row heavy decks don't want to play things like Mind Crush and all that other stuff, because it doesn't really do anything to stun the monsters. But anyway, on the last one, my personal favorite, Legacy of the Duelist. If you are seeing yourself going through grind games and you need to recover resources at the same time, this is like by far one of the best ways to do it. I like it because you can side this going first, because once again, you need to be able to play out turn 3 if you go first. You know, your opponent can still set back row and you can still get shut down even though you set up. That's something to look out for. And things like this, keep that in check. While this is on the board, each player can only set one spell or trap per turn. So dealing with one back row is much better than dealing with 4 to 5. Although they're going to set their best one, it's infinitely easier to deal with. Not only that, but you can also side this going second and pick apart certain back row. Let's say there is things like Mistake on the board that I need to deal with and all that good stuff, but I need to, I want to get through a little bit more back row first. Well, I can put multiple monsters on the board and all that good stuff. So I can, every time your monster declares an attack, you have the option to negate that attack, target a spell or trap on your opponent's field, destroy it, and all that good stuff. So you can do that every time, so the more monsters you stack, the better position you'll be in for as long as this remains on the board. Alright, so Mistake won't be the only thing that you have to worry about or be able to deal with, because you can deal with multiple things at any time you shall please, and you could also add a monster from grave to hand instead of conducting your draw phase, which controls your draw in a sense without leaving it up to chance. Now, this will not always work, because there are other floodgate monsters like Thunder King Ryo. Thunder King Ryo is an excellent floodgate monster and against Search Reliant decks, because it has a 1900 body, and you're not likely to play something that's strong enough to beat over the monster if your deck is that reliant on searching. So, with that being said, Forbidden Chalice is an excellent way to deal with things like Thunder King. Now, I wouldn't main deck this card because of things like Nightmares, because Nightmares exist, makes cards like this useless. So, there are other ways you can get around this as well, without needing to rely on like drawing a quick play spell, and let's say turning off just for a turn, and you're still unable to deal with the Thunder King. Because always remember, decks that play Thunder King are also probably going to be decks that play heavy amounts of back row. So keep that in mind. Chalice only lasts for the turn. You can play something like a Sanctum and bust out a Morale attack and just completely deal with the Thunder King by its and have a body on board, which is it's pretty solid. Now, there's one other set of cards that I would like to throw out there, because although Thunder King is a powerful card and it's hard to deal with, we are about to get another form of an anti-search card in the form of Super Bolt Thunder Dragon. Remember, Thunder Dragons are getting support as well, and not only that, but Super Bolt can protect itself, so cards like Morale Tech wouldn't do well. But what does do well against Thunder King, Inspect the Border, Super Bolt Thunder Dragon, hell, even a card like Masterpiece, well, you guessed it, my favorite way to deal with monsters, Kaijus. Kaijus are always my most recommended way of dealing with monsters, because you just deal with them. They have very, very little counterplay to them, and that's why I love them so much. Who cares about Super Bolt Thunder Dragon? Who cares how much it can protect itself? You ain't protecting yourself from this. So keep in mind, Super Bolt in the future will be an issue, and that's when these need to start being played. Insinuating that they already don't need to be played because of Gokis. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for these. These are some of the most solid options to deal with anti-searching. Now, if you are referencing, if there's things like Mistaken Arrest being put in play, then I'm sorry, Mistaken Arrest has no count. You have no counterplay to Mistaken Arrest. Not if they go first and set the card. There's very little ways to deal with a quick play spell that gets flipped over. So for that, I'm sorry, I don't really have any ways to deal with things like that. But luckily, any deck that is setting Mistaken Arrest is probably not the fastest deck either. So, with that being said, guys, consider these options right here for dealing with back row, for dealing with anti-search monsters, floodgate-ish monsters, as well, like Inspector Border, and all that good stuff, because some things like those can, you guessed it, stop searching, because a lot of monsters search as well. You don't just need spells. So, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below regarding these options and all that good stuff, because I've been doing this a while. Again, a lot of these cards are in my Necros side deck against said back row heavy decks or anti-searches. Granted, I don't have any space for Gamma in my main, but if I did, I would definitely be main decking it. I feel like any deck that relies on searching should main deck Gamma, like hands down, because of how prevalent Droll and Lockbird really is. So, once again, thank you guys very much from the bottom of my heart. I'm still growing pretty good, which I didn't expect, so that's always a good thing. So, thank you guys very much for watching. This is J Money, and I am signing out.